That's really good.
Yeah.
I didn't realize that, but I guess I do.
Oh, I see.
Oh, what?
We'll call the Willmar City Council work session to order for Monday, December 17th. First item on the agenda is a recognition of a retiring firefighter, Chief Hansen.
Mr. Mayor, members of the council, I'm honored to be in front of you tonight to announce the retirement or acknowledge the retirement of our Deputy Chief of Operations, Galen Koistra. Galen, I wrote this whole big 5-page speech and then left it on my desk, so we're just gonna wing it tonight. But Galen has been on the department for over 27 years. He started back in 1991. Over those years, he has held positions as firefighter, driver operator, lieutenant, captain, deputy chief of training, which is probably the hardest position to hold on the department, and then retired as deputy chief of operations, which makes him, at that point, he was third in charge of the department. So he's greatly going to be missed. He is already missed. He's been off, actually retired August 31st, then went and had a hip replacement and all kinds of stuff, so that's why we're here in December. But huge asset to our department, huge asset to our city. He, every current fire truck that we have, he has his fingerprints on in design or some sort of advice that he gave us, all the way up to the one we just got. So, interesting story about the one we just got. Actually, Galen had spinal surgery, and we went to do a final inspection of the truck, and he asked if he could come along. And I said that was fine, but he couldn't get on the truck or he couldn't do anything real physical with the truck. And then next thing I know, we're down there and we couldn't find him, and he's on a creeper underneath the truck looking at stuff. And we're like, okay, so.
You didn't say he didn't get on a.
Yeah, you're right. I didn't say that. So, but we're gonna miss him. There's lots of stories. He's been a mentor to the new firefighters, to the old seasoned firefighters. When I started on the department, he was my mentor, and we've grown 27 years later, and he's one of my best friends. We teach together, we do lots of stuff together, so he's greatly missed down there. So I want to present you with this certificate of appreciation presented to Galen Koistra for over 27 years of dedicated service to the city of Willmar and its fire department. You set an excellent example as a firefighter and distinguished yourself and the department with outstanding service. Because of your hard work, Willmar is a great community. From the city of Willmar, city council, mayor, and administration. Galen, just want to thank you.
Thank you.
I have lots of stories. I have lots of stories with Galen. I have one written down, but the mayor said that he would like to tell a few stories too. So we're just going to let him go ahead and go and tell a couple good stories.
Well, I don't know if I want to tell any good stories. I'll maybe save those for Saturday night.
Yeah.
Galen, Bull, you're really going to be missed down at the fire station. And you are a true asset to this community. You exemplify what this community represents and what this community should look like. And I remember in January of 2000 when I came to the city of Willmar, and you and I had a conversation shortly after I arrived. And one thing that I learned from you early on is that if you said something, it was right. And you always made sure that the facts were the facts, and you always looked out for the firefighters first, even at your own peril. And you always put the lives of the firefighters and the citizens of Willmar at the top of the list, and then you put yourself below that. And you can't say that about a whole lot of people, but I have the utmost respect. As you know, I served many years in the fire service, and you are at the top of the list of people that I respect.
Thank you.
So I agree wholeheartedly with what Chief Hansen said. I remember when you accepted the position of training officer, And what you had wanted to do and accomplish and see in the department only made us better and stronger. So on behalf of the mayor's office, I want to thank you, and I'm not sure if council members want to make some comments as well, but you know, you are a true asset to our community. We're glad that you and Sally and your family are here. You have given so much to this community that we could never repay you in the debt of gratitude we have to you. So you are sorely going to be missed. So any council members want to make any comments?
Thanks for your service.
Councilor Vega?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Thank you for your service. And all those injuries, was that from men's basketball league at the auditorium?
Yeah, that's, yeah, like I told my doctor, I had spinal cord surgery in March. I had my spinal cord looked like an hourglass. I got that fixed. And like I told him, I'm a 6'5" guy in a 5'9" world. I've hit my head. So that was taken care of. I had some family issues before that. I should have had it done a long time ago, but priorities changed. And then I had a hip replaced in October, and so it's been a very, very good year. The downside was retiring. My body was getting older, like we talked about earlier. It was just time. It was the right time. Two stories. One with Marv. I was at a fire call, and I was command. And Marv, we were taught this early in the fire scene, firefighters got priority. I was command, I had a crew inside working, and Marv came up to talk to me, tapped on the window of the truck, and I put my hand up, wait, because I got guys talking to me on the inside. He tapped again. I said, you're going to have to wait, I got guys talking to me inside. The window rolled down, he goes, I want to talk to you. I said, I know, but I got guys talking to me inside. You're going to have to wait. So I apologize for that, Marv, but there was priorities on that call, so. But,
Like I said, you always put the firefighters
yep,
first.
so that was priority there. So I just want to say thank you. It was an honor and privilege to serve the 27 years. It was a great time. I feel very honored. I got to see a lot of country. I got to go to a lot of conferences, truck committees and stuff like that. This is truly the best job in the world. Unlike maybe being on the city council, this is truly the best job in the world. So I really appreciate it, and you're under great leadership, and so it was a good time for me to step away. Frank made it really happy and fun to be in the fire department again, as it was when Marv was in there, but it was nice to get back into that again. So I appreciate the time and opportunity I had for the years I had. I got to see a lot of stuff, do a lot of stuff, and I hope I did the city proud. That's what my main priorities were, so
Perfect.
thank you.
Thank you.
So,
Thank you. Yep. No, Chief Hansen probably didn't tell you. I mean, you can leave if you want, or you can stick around for the whole meeting, and we'll be out of here probably about 10 o'clock. So
well, I think we're going to talk outside for a second, then we'll see what happens. So.
Okay, sounds good.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Good answer.
Next is Robbins Island Legacy Grant. Mr. Holland, are you going to introduce this, or going straight to? Okay, looks like Sean's.
Go ahead, Sean.
Mr. Christensen.
Thank you, Mayor, members of the council. I'm going to see which one is which here.
I think you were on the right one before, not the other way.
Your other right.
There you go.
It's left up here. That's only the agenda. Oh, here it is.
Pull it down, it'll be there.
They're just not labeled. All right, so here. Now we're on board. Mayor, members of the council, in front of you is what amounts to a modification to the legacy grant that we've talked about for a number of years now. History, of course, is that the Parks and Trails Commission first saw this in 2016, and we received a legacy grant for Robbins Island in 2017. One of the desired elements was a master plan update. So when we did that update, we included the Four Seasons Shelter, boardwalk, destination playground, celebrate the light of the world, and so forth. In August, this past August, we requested a modification to that grant. And I got Stuart Crosby here is gonna, with SRF, is gonna discuss that modification and where we go from here.
Great, thanks, Sean. Members of the council, pardon me. I've got a presentation I want to just put in here. Is it on here? Let's see. Oh, here we go. Okay, yeah. All right, well, here it is, right here. Sean asked me to come in this evening to give you a timeline of how we got to the point we are right now for the legacy grant that the city has received. And I think it's important to realize that this process started in 2015 when the original master plan for Robbins Island and several other parks in Willmar was kicked off. And that was a really successful master plan process. An outcome of that was staff at the time, Steve Brissendine, applied for a legacy, well, first had to apply for regional status for Robbins Island Regional Park. And that was made possible by the master plan. The Greater Minnesota Regional Parks and Trails Commission did grant Robbins Island the regional status and also put it at a level 1, a high level for regional status, which is very good because that's what you need really to be really eligible for getting legacy funds. So after that, we had, I'm going to get my timeline right here, the staff went forward and made an application for Robbins Island for the legacy. That was started in 2016, and the grant was actually awarded in 2017. And you'll see here on my timeline that in 2017, when Willmar received the legacy grant for Robbins Island, it included the four-season building and plaza, an interpretive boardwalk, trails both around the building and leading up to that boardwalk, and a boathouse. And the total grant received, or that was granted at the time, was $606,000. After that was provided, the mayor put forward a committee to update the master plan, and that was based on a couple of things. And you'll see here on our timeline that just in earlier this year, we went through, it started in 2017 and finished in June. We did this master plan update for the park. And the primary reason for that was because between the time of the first master plan and the time that the legacy application was submitted, a lot had happened at the park, including the playground, which has been a huge success, and a lot more interest. There's also, there was in the works a new entry monument that the Lions Club put together. And so that park has gotten a lot of interest, excitement, and development to it. So the mayor felt that it was important to pull together members of the committee of community and council as well to do an update. And we went right back to square one, looked at all of the objectives for the park, and I think came up with a really good update to that. It did change the park, or the master plan, a little bit, but I think for the better. And another outcome of that was a bit of reorganizing the priorities for the park, and a lot more priority was placed toward creating some building spaces that could provide support for the playground, for Rockin' Robbins, for the Celebrate the Light of the World festival that is underway right now. And another outcome of that master plan was the master plan update was that there wasn't as much of an urgency to build this interpretive boardwalk because there seemed to be a lot more interest in getting that building updated and providing restrooms and all of the services that would be needed for the other amenities that are out there. So I was asked by staff to see if we could request a modification to the legacy grant that would actually remove the boardwalk from that, because we had $100,000 and some I'll show you in a minute, allocated toward that, and see if we could get that funding brought over and utilized for the building. And we went through a process that included a staff visit. We had Greater Minnesota Regional Parks and Trails Commission staff come out this last November to take a look at the park, talk through the master plan and the master plan update, and get a sense as to exactly what has been happening out at the park and the real reason for requesting a modification in the funding so that we wouldn't be building the boardwalk right away, but there was a real interest in putting more of the funds toward the building. The revised, the budget that was put forward includes a number of items, and as you can see here, let me back up here, sorry. The original grant the application was for $606,000, and it included the interpretive boardwalk. The modified grant application, if you can see here, does not have that boardwalk included. And the amount that has been allocated or requested for allocation for the Four Season building is up at $400,000. And so Greater Minnesota Regional Parks and Trails Commission came out, they agreed with our request to remove the boardwalk from the grant application and put those funds toward the Four Season building. That's not to say that the Four Seasons or that the boardwalk won't be done. It's just it's not as much of a priority now, and that actually they see a lot more value in developing some of the facilities that will be utilized more readily with the playground, with the Rockin' Robins event. So having those amenities out there to support the larger crowds that are coming out now year-round at the park. So the amount of the grant application hasn't changed, it's just the allocation toward that. Although this has been approved by this legacy fund has been approved by Greater Minnesota Regional Parks and Trails Commission, it actually can't be utilized until the City Council approves that use. And so I believe, if I'm right, we will be, or you will be later this evening voting on the approving the revised budget that came with that grant. So after that visit, what we did receive from the Greater Minnesota Regional Parks and Trails Commission is an approval for the project revision. So it has been officially approved. They agree with our request, and it's, I think, at the City Council's point of view now to determine whether or not this is funds that would be useful for Robbins Island. But I think it is a really good step in direction forward for actually getting the development and that Four Season shelter built, hopefully sometime very soon. So Mayor, I don't know if you have any questions or council members?
Well, I'll leave it up to the council. So council, any questions? Councilmember Nelson.
Hi, thank you, Stuart. I was very surprised to see that this was removed. I think we've talked about this grant process. I served on the Robbins Island Task Force, and I don't know that I support removing the interpretive boardwalk at this point in time. I think it would be really reshape Robbins Island to have something on that side. Mm-hmm. I do not remember that coming out of there. I know we knew we were going to be short funds to do our Four Season shelter.
Sure.
But I didn't realize that this process was in place. I had a phone conversation with our administrator. He did indicate that we still needed to approve this. Mm-hmm. But it's my understanding it's already gone before the legacy. I don't want to jeopardize this grant.
Sure.
But I am surprised that we weren't asked before about options that we had, and even options to come up with other funds if that's what's needed to get the Four Seasons shelter done. So I'm a little concerned about that. I think this grant provided an opportunity to do something unique with that boardwalk. And I'm concerned about whether we will come back to do that, to change that area. That boardwalk provided some unique opportunities, I think, to enhance that area. So I express a concern. I certainly don't want to jeopardize this grant. I understand the process, and I'm assuming someone authorized for this process to take place. So again, I don't want to jeopardize it, but I do not support removing that. I think we may have other opportunities to come up with funds to do that Four Season shelter and to see the grant through the way it was designed.
Councilmember, could I respond to that and give you a little bit of background? The boardwalk is a really important asset, I think, for the park. It'll help to, as you mentioned, expand the trail system and provide for accessible use around that part of the park. One of the things that has to happen for that boardwalk really to be effective, its interpretation is meant to be interpreting a wetland or a restored wetland area. And that wetland area right now doesn't exist because of how the park is currently graded. And the vision for the master plan is that eventually that whole flat area that is used for rock and robins needs a lot of work because, as you know, it's very wet in the summer. And the vision that we had was that all that water would be brought over to where the boardwalk would be on the east side of the park. And we would be holding it there before it's released into the lake, and that helps to improve the water quality of the lake. The challenge is you can build a boardwalk before you do the wetland, but it would it wouldn't function as a boardwalk because you effectively would have a boardwalk in the middle of a dry field. So it seemed much more useful of the public funds to look further down our time frame and to develop that boardwalk at the time that we do the regrading of the park itself, so that you actually have a wetland and you have those benefits of both the interpretation for the boardwalk but also improving the water quality. And so the sequencing of how these elements has been changed. It's not necessarily that we're changing the priority or the importance of these elements. It's more the sequencing of when they need to be done so that they can be done and developed effectively. Does that make sense?
I understand that. I just hope that there's a commitment, that to follow through on that.
Mm-hmm.
This provided us an opportunity for dollars for something that is to me more of a challenge to get done than park equipment and those types of things.
Sure.
The fact that this was an opportunity with the grant money to be able to do that, that's my concern, is whether we will follow through to do that in the future.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
And so, again, I think that we need to do the four-season shelter right, and we need to make sure that we are protecting Robbins Island. I think that was one of the things that was spoke very loud and clear in our meetings when we had our Robbins Island Task Force. And so I just express a concern that we don't commercialize it too much, but that we stay true to what we were hoping to do, and to be able to start to utilize the other lake over there and to do these things. And I guess when will we do this?
Mm-hmm.
And so from a commitment standpoint, to walk away from this right now concerns me.
Okay. I understand your concerns.
Councilman Rasmus.
Okay. If we were to decide that the four-season porch would possibly be a good location for the community center. Okay? And so it would just be a larger building in the same area, but that would provide more opportunity for programming out of that community center for the seniors and for programming for community function, and be closer to the water for the view, and to have somebody in that building instead of having to staff that and the community center presently across the road. What does that do to the grant?
Well, that's, I think, a good question. The grant right now specifies that the funds need to be used for, among a few other things, the four-season shelter. And it is, when we say shelter, it's not just a covered picnic shelter. It's
Right.
understood that that'll have could have a community room, plumbing, for use all year round, so it'll be heated. It's a substantial structure.
Right.
And I think that it's really up to the city to determine the exact focus of the programming for that building. So
Right.
it
But
could,
does it jeopardize the grant at all if we decided that would be the community center, only a larger building instead of the four-season building? It's going to be a four-season building,
Sure.
but just larger to accommodate more programming.
I see what
Would
you're
that
saying.
jeopardize the grant?
No, I don't think that would. I think that the purpose of the grant is to develop a four-season facility that will support the function of the park activities. And if it's a community center that has more facility, that would only become a larger asset for the community on the park itself.
Right,
Yeah.
okay.
Councilman Nelson.
It's my understanding that with this grant, everything has to be done, all bills have to be completed by June of 2020.
2020,
correct?
Yeah.
So we're kind of pushing the envelope already for getting these things done in 19 and the spring of 20.
I think that there is some urgency to it. Yes, you're correct. And I know that Eng & Associates is going to be coming up next to talk about some additional details with the building concepts, but it certainly is a timeline that can be achievable. And I think that it's important that things happen quickly.
In understanding the process that you've gone through, and again, I do not want to jeopardize this grant, but we have a signed document that says they've accepted the changes to remove the boardwalk.
Correct.
Did we submit a signed document requesting these changes?
We through communication with the Greater Minnesota Regional Parks and Trails Commission staff, we did ask for that. So yes, that was a request that we made of them to review the grant, the modification to the grant.
So were they aware that we had not approved it yet?
They were aware that the council had not approved the grant application, correct, yeah. And they also had stated that until the grant is not going to be, can't be utilized until it does have the support of the council.
So we have to submit our plans to them for what we're actually going to do following
No, I'm
this?
sorry. Just, the council has to approve the use of the legacy funds, and then that resolution will go to Greater Minnesota Regional Parks and Trails Commission, and at that point then the funds will be available for use. But they don't need to see any additional plans per se for the building. They will do a follow-up visit once the park has been developed to verify that what has been requested is part of what was actually constructed.
Councilmember Muskie.
I don't want to jump items here. My question may be coming up in the next item, but in light of a comment I just heard about possibility of a community center, which we have not talked about, and in light of removing the boardwalk, how much money in this plan is dedicated towards a four-season shelter or a four-season building?
Well, that's a good question. So the application itself and the grant that has been allocated for it has $606,000, and a good majority of that is for the building. The actual breakdown is $130,000 has to be of that $606,000 for trails, $80,000 for a plaza, which would be an exterior component to that building. And then there's a certain component that would be allowed to be used for design and engineering, and it's roughly about $70,000 of that $606,000.
Okay. Thanks.
Sure. I have one other slide here that I put up because I think it's helpful to see a comparison. The 2017 budget is what was in the original application. So as you can see, we had a $781,000 project budget at the time, which included a four-season shelter, the interpretive boardwalk, trails plaza, and design and engineering. The legacy grant covers $606,000 of that. A local match is required as part of that legacy grant, and the local match that was part of the original is $175,000. So in order to get this legacy grant, the city will have to come up with $175,000. That doesn't mean that the scope of the project can't expand, and in fact, there has been discussion about improving the four-season shelter beyond what was originally intended. And when you see the 2018 amended budget on the right-hand column, the $952,000 number for a four-season shelter is the estimate, concept estimate for a building that Eng & Associates will be talking about in a little bit. But you can still see that the interpretive boardwalk has been removed from the amended budget, and trails and plaza and design and engineering are still a part of that. The total grant amount of $606,000 still stands, but it means that if this larger four-season shelter is developed, that the additional funds will have to come from elsewhere.
Okay, I don't see any other questions coming from the council, so thank you for your report. And are you going to stick around?
Yes, indeed,
Okay.
I will, yeah.
Okay. Next, we'll hear from, am I going back to Sean, or who am I going to? Ike?
To Incan and Associates.
Okay, I guess,
Unless, Sean, you want to make a comment?
sure.
I would say too, Mayor, members of the council, when this, provided this gets put to the council agenda, we would be asking for we recommend the approval of that amendment, number 1 to that grant application. All right, so Ingen and Associates will be here. Richard and Andy Ingen will be here to discuss a little bit about some of the concepts. I know most of you have seen these concepts in passing before. And so the segue we have of the grant application modification will walks right into this four-season shelter options or potential buildings. So Richard and Andy will discuss some of those.
Okay, we should have a PowerPoint here. Good evening, Mayor and Council, and I think our PowerPoint should be on here. That got installed? Oops. There we go. Okay. We can go on to the next one here. Now, we began with the master plan that Stuart developed and has been worked on for a number of years. We tried to build on what the objectives were. One, this was going to be a major focal point of the community. It's a regional park. There's been a lot of community action on Rockin' Robbins, the lights, activity. It's the last couple of years have been very different with that. And the four-season building was to continue it. And we would, the summer, it would be the center of trails, lake activity, could rent canoes, kayaks maybe, obviously hiking. In the winter, it would be a center for winter activities. The lights is one of the activities. It would have skiing, cross-country skiing, snowshoeing. Obviously the summer, it would be skating in the winter. It's four seasons, and so the building as well as the outside, and all those activities would really center on this location. The location we're showing the building is what was on the master plan, except we moved a little farther onto the island. We want the building on solid base. Where we were showing it originally, there was down 20 feet, there was virtually no strength in any soil. It was lake deposits, very bad swamp. But the island is built with glacial till, very nice solid base. And so the drawings we have, we show the outer edge of it about the vicinity of the current restroom building. We may want to come in a little farther. There's still 7 feet of material to take out there. But on the island, it's very good material down lower. So this can all be done there. The building will have the key issue of the program. This is sort of a new venture. It's not something that Willmar has. So there's a series of things that are questions to make, but there's really 3 different parts of the building. One is a community room. And what's the size? What should the size of it be? It is a warming house, it's gathering. We chose to use the size of the Gurian Dreesen building as sort of that would be the minimum size that we could use. With events, it could be all kinds of sizes larger. That's not a scientific decision, but that was an arbitrary one. As a comparison, it's 1,400 square feet is what we're showing on our plan. Rice Park was 560, just a little over a third of that. The Andreessen is 1,400. Prairie Woods Warming House is 760. The Historical Society is about 1,150. So this is about 50% larger than or 20% larger than the room at the Historical Society. I could see a lot of arguments that it should be larger. I could see different issues with that, and that's something we have to decide. We really need that. We've had meetings with staff and the mayor and such, but I think there is a number of partners that will want to have input in here. That I think we need to maintain that communication. The second part is public restrooms. We're programming just a little less than the square footage of the current restroom building and the dressing room building. The difference is that we have more restrooms, we have private restrooms, we've got a variety of spaces there. The dressing areas are incorporated into the restroom facilities. The third part is park headquarters, staff offices, concession, equipment rentals. One of the things that have been decided is that it needs to be staffed, so we need a home base for some staff. If we are going to have rental equipment, we're showing that in the place there. The amount of space we need for there, once again, is based on the amount of that you really need. It's a little larger than what we have. I think, let's see, the rental space that we are showing is about 480 square feet. The skate rental at the Civic Center is 348. But we also would have cross-country skiing, snowshoeing, and some other activities. So I certainly don't think that that's a high number. But I think we do need to refine exactly what we need there. This is not trying to be I don't think the program is plush at all in areas. It's squeezed down. We have several diagrams just showing those three areas. The community room, we want it visible from the lake, or from the highway, a lot of glass. We have the mechanical room, or then the rental is off to the side where it's an office, it's very visible, and the restrooms and mechanical and such are in the background. The sun is important for these buildings. You want to integrate the outdoor spaces with the building. The community room looks directly to the south. We want the summer shade. We want it to be shaded so it's not blinding in the summer. Cool. But in the winter, it's nice to have some direct sun. Winter, it's the focal point for the trails, the skating, the snowshoeing, winter hiking. We do want to have outdoor activities all around the building from each of the sides. One side would be to the lake view, one more to the beach, and the other one at the entrance. And we are showing on the entrance, we'd have a fire pit. I think in the winter with activities like we have for the lights, I could see trying to work them on the trail so that people walk, get out of their cars and walk. They come back at here, and it'd be really incentive to have, I'm sure you could find businesses that would sponsor hot chocolate or cider or something, and s'mores even in the wintertime out there. The rental office, the staff area, we want to be able to see as much as possible. So from those windows, they designed that they could see from the beach to Rock and Robbins, the flat area of the park. The community room views, obviously each direction would be a unique view. Willmar, we advertise that we're where the lakes begin. And yet there's virtually no public buildings that have access inside where you can see water. One exception is the second floor of the college. Another one is the golf course. But here, the idea would be from these community spaces, you'd see west to the lake, down to the beach, and that part of the park. We have three approaches, but the first approach is approach A, locates the building. The front of the building is approximately where the restroom building is, and it goes on to the We raise the floor plan about 4 feet. That would be working with the grade that we're taking. We have to take a couple trees out to make this work. The fill that we'd be taking out would raise some of the patio areas around it. So we can have areas, it doesn't mean they're all hard surface. They could be lawn and grass, but they'd be up a little higher to get a better view of the lake. Some of the shoreline would be opened up. We would keep it wouldn't be a mowed down to the lake, but we'll have trees, but you'll be looking through trees, through vegetation to the water, and vice versa. They look onto the building. This is the floor plan that we developed there. It has those three main parts, a series of restrooms. The big ones have access from both inside the building and outside the building. We have several single occupant restrooms, which I think are very important for this kind of a function for family use. It solves a lot of issues. It has one meeting room, it's about the size of the Guri and Dreesen building. This plan does not have a kitchen, but it has a counter. It'll have a counter, sort of what was at Rice Park, or it could be a metal one, something like that. The food would be for people who would bring crock pots, or it could be rented out. Somebody would schedule it. It has the office area. We did develop this in a cost estimate, and then it was mentioned that we should do a plan that would match the budget. And this is that plan. It does shrink the size. We eliminated the staff office. Rental could be done in kiosks outside. The restrooms are a little smaller. The meeting room is smaller. I'm not sure that the meeting room is large enough to meet the needs you really are needing. But it was close, the budget, even this one was a little above what the funds that we had assigned originally. We had some conversations, and one approach would be, they mentioned that building needs to be staffed, and the city is also struggling with the community center needs to be staffed. And a lot of the spaces relate to each other. So we did a fast plan in the same location, trying to incorporate the program of the community center. The community center has just under 12,000 square feet. And that's approximately the size of this. We've maintained the uses that we had in the program center, but we added several more meeting facilities. We added storage rooms. We had a shop. We have a serving kitchen. I don't see in a community center you'd really want a food prep kitchen that's licensed, but you do need a good catering kitchen, serving kitchen. It's a different, simpler license. We have a lot of the functions that we have in the community center. Once again, there was no input from the community center, from the senior citizens, from other stakeholders in that facility, and obviously that would be an important thing. The plan, one of the things we did locate here that probably is a weak point of the current one, we do have a large number of these small storage rooms. So all the special uses from the Boy Scouts to the Lions or Kiwanis or somebody that rents the area, they could rent one of these rooms and they store their files there. And it's one of the issues that most groups have. Each room has a storage room for storing tables and chairs and what's needed in there. The idea would be each of these venues would be different, focusing on the different kinds of uses. Each one would have a good view of something. But this is not approach that, this was just an idea to start thinking about. And we're thinking of a simple building. We think we want to have a big, strong overhang to shed water, to provide shade for the windows. We would, one of the questions, these buildings often have rougher use just for the nature of the hours and everything, like a skating house. I could see even some of the interiors be desirable to have masonry, that it's a little more durable and harder. Nothing extravagant, nothing luxurious. We are showing that we would have, one room would have like a gas fireplace. The fire pit outside we were thinking would be real wood, old-fashioned fire. The city has a lot of firewood out at the brush dump that it could be obtained, I think, fairly easily. I think you even get volunteers that would chop and split it for you if you needed it. But on the costs, approach A, these costs were done last May, June for fall construction. And so this hasn't been updated. Our templates that we're using for cost estimating going for this coming year are about 10% higher than we were using at that time, as what we're seeing what's happening in the market. But this was a comparison. I think the 503, the main building was the 952, which Stuart used on his sheet. And the other one was 503. That was less than we got. We did not develop a cost estimate for incorporating the community center because that really hasn't been discussed adequately. Are there any questions?
Okay, questions for Engen and Associates here on what they proposed, along with the budgets that they're proposing. Councilmember Christensen.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. You mentioned the idea of having the community center in along with this, which is a good idea, one building serving many purposes. However, I know the seniors want to keep it where it's at, and one of the reasons that they mentioned to me was they're afraid to cross that highway to get to Robbins Island. I mean, it's a dangerous intersection unless we would put some semaphores or lights up there. it's dangerous coming and going for seniors. I suspect even for younger people it is. With all the traffic we've had with the lights out there, I mean, I drive by there many, many times, and it's just loaded with cars. So that has to be, something has to be thought along those lines, because they do like where it's at, and it's a nice, they can sneak in there from behind Lakeland Avenue or cross the bridge and get in. It's pretty easy, but keep that in mind when they're talking about this.
Yeah, that's a valid point. You know, if they come off the highway, they still have to make either the one way or the other. They're making a left turn someplace there. But that's a good point.
Councilor Maskey.
Thank you for the plans. Approach C is
Yep.
not costed out. What would be the?
We didn't, you know, it's about 3 times larger than the first one, but we didn't look at a cost estimate. There's a number of things that come into play there. That was just a fast sketch to get an idea because it's, you know, it's something it seemed like it's an idea that it should be considered in the big picture. And all of these costs, you know, none of the costs really reflected the patios and the outdoor features and what do we do with the utilities. One of the things is we found out that the water service there is not, so we have not included the water service, but there's a good water main on the other side of the island. It could be incorporated in here, but it also would serve something up at the playground and some other uses. And I think some of the questions toward the bottom here are really, the big question is, we should start, what is the program? What are we trying to do here? And I think the community center is one part of that conversation. The quality of construction, I do think the goal is to have something that's durable, easy to maintain, and park buildings have rough use. So most of our buildings are sheetrock just about everywhere. I'm not entirely sure that all of those areas, that's quite even adequate. I think we might need something a little more durable. Another question is we do need input, you know, from a stakeholder group, because senior citizens are, you know, very interested and have a big claim, but there's also other community groups, everything from the lighting, the Willmar Fest, there's a whole series of groups. So it seems like it'd be prudent to have a facility committee put aside, representative of the council, but also the broad interest groups for input. We have met with staff on this, but I think there's other groups that will want to have community input, and I think we'd welcome that, and that would be incorporated in what we're talking about.
I think a price range would be very beneficial because right now I'm struggling when we bring on an idea of a community center. We have local option sales tax that we passed for a community center. We have local option sales tax that we put in for improvements to Robbins Island, and without knowing the values on it, I don't even know what we're talking about, because also, I mean, we have a $175,000 match that I'm assuming the taxpayers, if they're paying for a facility already, don't want to be double taxed on the matching funds for the grant if it's going to something that was already covered under local option sales tax. There's a lot of things that add to the complexity of this issue now that we've added the conversation of a community center, because right away I could go back to Councilmember Nelson's point, the boardwalk could be put back in if it was going to be used from the community center dollars or something. There's so many things now that make it a little more complicated.
If I may respond to that, I do think that's a very good point. And I think everything from the road, to build this building, we're building a building, but equally important to the building is what happens around it. We've got patios, and obviously if we're doing excavation, we've got soil that can work for lawn, and we can raise some of that. But where do the road goes? The plan changes the road. I think it's really paramount that the safety between the walking trails and the traffic be, one crossing point right at the heart here that's very simple. Otherwise, the trails stay away from the cars. I think that's what it has to happen. I think for that, you really need, it's not necessarily priorities, but something, what is the next phase of Robbins Island? Which projects go? And you need that water service has to come in, but it's better not to put a little bit here in this project, a little bit. That's one contractor does it. The road, I think if we touch the road, you touch the road and do it. And I think there's a lot of pieces. They don't have necessary breakdown prices. We do need, on all of them, probably a linking survey, because we got a survey of a little piece, but we're coming around. And I think now would be the time to actually try to come back and actually have each of the pieces that come up with the monies that you've appropriated. And you obviously want them high priorities, but they aren't necessarily the highest priorities, but in time-wise, they make sense to do at this moment.
Councilmember Nelson, followed by Osmus.
Thank you. These are the first that I've seen these drawings, but I'm assuming that this community center concept is the drawing that I've heard about that council members and the mayor have been sharing in the community. So is that correct? Is this the drawing that's been?
The drawing was done
Is this
a few
the only
months ago.
drawing that you, so it's, these have been done for several months, correct?
Yes,
Okay.
all of them.
I struggle with, both from looking at it from Robbins Island and from the task force, of being concerned about how that island is going to be used and putting too much on the island. When you look at the traffic that's in the community center parking lot on a regular basis, and that traffic would be there, the parking lots that would be needed, the master plan that was updated looked at activities that could take place 12 months out of the year, whether it be along the beach or the lake or some of those areas. And so I can't say that I can support putting the community center right now, but this is the first time that I have seen the drawing. I see them as two different uses in a community our size. I think there is a need to continue the services in the community center that would benefit the seniors, but also other populations. And so I hesitate to say that we've come up with the correct thing to do. But again, this is the first that I've seen it, and I think you said that too. We need to take a look at, how does the community feel about this? Because there's lots of rumors out there. There's lots of conversations going on regarding that. When I look at drawing B, that isn't what we need there. Drawing A is more money. Does it accomplish what we want for a 4-season shelter? Your conversation about the staff being able to see the whole island goes away when you put the community center there, if I observed that correctly. And so I would say that I'm not ready to make a decision based off from what I am seeing here tonight. And I put a concern back to long-term, what's going to be on Robbins Island? And how are we going to accomplish that? And I don't know that we know the needs right now of either the community center. I mean, the master plan for Robbins Island is there, but what components are we going to do? And I know this has been around for a while, but it was stated that we've seen these, but I don't believe that all of us have.
Would it be, one option would be, I sense that the city was very satisfied with the Robbins Island Task Force that did the earlier part. Would that be a logical group to be reinvigorated, modified, or whatever you're doing, but sort of because that's the spirit, I think, that you're really looking for. And I think we're trying to work with that too.
Okay.
I don't know that we'll get an answer for that right now.
No.
It kind of sounds like we're against everything we're trying to propose.
No, well, no.
Councilmember Osmus.
Okay. I know that the council hasn't discussed the community center, and that is something that I anticipate we'll be doing in January at our retreat. But when I asked before if that could even be a possibility, I didn't want to, with the legacy grant, that was the purpose of that discussion, because I thought we're not going to bring this forward if we can't do that with the legacy grant money, because that was important. I have not seen these floor plans. This is the first I've seen this. I think it's an exciting possibility to be able to do that. Some of the seniors are very much in favor of it. They like the idea of being able to take a right turn out of there instead of having to take a left turn where the present community center is. And there's things we'll discuss at the retreat in January. We may not come to a consensus, but at least we know it's a possibility. And we know that the foundation, because I'd also heard that the ground couldn't support a community center there, but obviously it can. I would be very interested to know how the parking would work, because like you said, it would change the flow. So there has to be parking close. If it's a possibility that it would be the community center, we'd have to make sure that there's a lot of parking close to the entrances, multiple entrances. But that's, that's some of the stuff that we have to figure out. I definitely, as far as the plans go, totally in favor of going with Plan A. I think that's the size we need. As far as the boardwalk money, that has to get removed from there then to go towards the building. I think that makes sense. And like what's explained, the boardwalk can happen in 2 or 3 years when some of the other excavation happens. But, so that I think we should be moving forward. Whether or not the community center is going to be at that location, that's going to be future discussions.
Yep.
But at least we know it's feasible.
Councilmember Alvarado.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Thank you for your presentation. I think there's a couple things going on. It sounds like we have to move forward with the legacy money, start the building in shortly and have it done by 2020. So I feel there's some pressure there. I think we have to, like you suggested, we got to get the parties involved that have a stake in it and get their feedback. So I think that all this has to happen sooner than later, obviously, because, time is flying and we don't want to miss out on opportunities. I don't think there's anybody that doesn't believe in it. As the mayor alluded to, I think we're all excited about the possibilities of increasing the use of Robbins Island and its access to the community. So I think that's a good point. Again, I just think that we have a lot to discuss come January. So, thank you.
So Richard, if you go to Plan C, and you incorporate the restrooms, and then come straight across with a wall, that would then go over and incorporate the piece off to the left, and then leave out those 4 buildings off to the side, those 4 rooms, what would that look like?
You're trying, what we're talking about, I see, trying to build part of it and call it Phase 1 and Phase 2 would be the community center.
Or whatever the council wishes to do.
Something like that could happen. I think that this is an initial plan and there's all kinds of tweaking we can make. One thought on the site that I think I would like to do if it was a Plan C, I'd make it longer and a little narrower to fit on the site with where I'd like to save as many of the oak trees as I can, and I want to be up out of the swamp material. So a little narrower building, I think, will have some practicality and still meeting all these things. But there would be a greater cost of doing a 2-phase building. One of the utilities are all coming from the other side. They're all coming from on that side, so that it costs more to build it in 2 different pieces rather than at one time. But it could be done, and I think we could tweak that plan to sort of make it. I think what you're saying is try to do the 4-season building that you could expand to a community center.
Or whatever the council wishes to do.
Yeah, or something. I think something like that could be done. It would not be less costly, but because
I'm getting hesitant to attend any meetings anymore. So. But I just have to say, when we're doing the curling club, that was looked at for 2 years before it ever got in front of the council.
Because one of the unique things on this, it's not just on an urban site with a sidewalk and streets. And the reason everybody's here is for the site, the views and activities outside. So it's equally important that all the spaces outside are done. And they cost money too. So doing something that's an end that you build off is it going to be the side toward the lake or the side toward the island? The front, people are coming from the side away from the lake. That's where the parking or the road is and everything. And yet the views are best toward the lake. And so I can see some dilemmas of trying to chop it in half and do something there. But if that's the wish, we can do something like that.
Councilmember Fagerly.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Have you looked at building a two-story so you could actually have a good view of the lakes?
No, as a general rule, if you look at buildings with the cost of accessibility and stairways and things for spending a few $100,000 there for making that work, typically any building under 10,000 square feet, if you can have the land, you can do it in one level, the construction is so much more economical. If you're getting a bigger building, multi-story makes sense. If you're talking about a community center, so many things are interrelated. If there's food, I think there can be food in several different spaces. And then staff, how do you, the managing of it, you want staff right where a door is, where people come in. So the first place, if somebody's got a question, if it's staff, they're not hiding. They're very visible. So I don't think for building the size, it's very practical to build two-story. I think raising the view up, which help us because of the contours right where we're trying to build it. And it's a simple place for all the spoils for lawn. I think we can do some of that pretty economically. And 4 feet does make a big difference. It is a beautiful view of the.
But there's a lot of bad soil there, isn't there? And that costs money to dig it out.
That's correct, it is.
New,
Yeah.
so that's the cost of an elevator.
I think there's some program functions of a small building that's two-story. If we didn't have the land is one thing, and even how you function, so many of the uses, if you took a community center, what would you put on one floor and what would be on the other floor? Because I think most of your venues want to be close together because of access to restrooms, and if you want to have some kind of a serving, catering, be able to come in with food. But I think we'd be open to look at all these questions.
It's not off the table.
Okay.
Councilmember Schwantes.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. It seems to me we have a couple of things that we're really talking about tonight. First, the grant and the management of that. Then we're into the building sizes and then the community center. And really what we need to know for tonight for staff's purposes is in regard to the grant, right? So do we feel comfortable using that additional $127,000 to put it into the building? And I look at the floor plan of the one that's the option B that's drawn out with the funds that were originally available, and that just does not seem workable in my mind. And so I also think of the timeline that we have and the period of time that we need to spend these funds by. I don't know that the boardwalk is feasible and the building and the other items. And so I think to say that we're going to move funds from the boardwalk to this building is not saying that we don't support or don't want the boardwalk. It's just the timeline that we expect that would get done. So just to be able to move things forward tonight, I'd like to get a sense from people in the work session here and whether or not we're in agreement that the $127,000 get moved to the Four Seasons shelter so staff can move forward. I would be supportive of that.
I don't see that on the agenda as an item that needs to be moved forward. I hear what you're saying, but I don't see it as an item that we were supposed to move to the agenda tonight. So do we need to? That's the question that I have. Does that decision have to be made
Mayor.
tonight?
And Stuart, if you could address this also, I know that the state had requested that the documents that they approved get signed by me by this month, basically saying that the council has authorized this move. And it's one of those bureaucratic things that, when you're dealing with money and grant funds, and they don't like to have open-ended timelines, and so they're trying to get this paperwork to move forward. But Stuart, I don't know, did they give you a specific, like 1 January, or I know that they encouraged me because I got that email, and I can't remember her name right now, but she encouraged me to get it done by the end of this month.
Yeah, I don't think there's any immediate time frame on it, but I do think it's something that should be done sooner rather than later. I'm happy to check with them just to verify that, but I don't think, my understanding is it isn't something that's extremely time sensitive.
Okay.
Is there any reason we wouldn't move it forward tonight? I mean, I think the whole issue is the money coming away from the boardwalk. I don't see any more information coming in the next 2 weeks that's going to change anybody's mind one way or the other.
I
So
think
either you have faith that the boardwalk is going to be completed in the future, and that money should be going towards the building, towards a larger building, or you don't.
that's part of the master plan for Robbins Island is the boardwalk, and so it doesn't go away.
Right.
What we're trying to do is that, as you can see from his estimates, even the smaller building, potentially, we could run out of funds on that. So we got to get that out for bid. I think that the reason I brought it forth to the council tonight is I would like to get approval that we can use the funds towards the building. That's number one. But then number two, in January here in about 4 weeks, the council will decide the priority of the projects and what you want or don't want on Robbins Island. And at that point, if you make the decision you want the Four Seasons building, then we're going to come back to you in February or March with a couple conceptual drawings. We'll get approval on that, and then we'll get that out to bid in the spring. That's kind of how I visualize it.
I heard enough from Stuart Crosby to understand that we probably can't do the boardwalk unless we do some other things that will be more dollars than what's in there. I think my frustration is that this was submitted for changes in August, and it's December, and it's the first that we're hearing of it. So I thank you for your explanation of that. I am disappointed that it is necessary to do that. But I think it's symptomatic of communication issues that it seems to be. And as I said before, I do not want to jeopardize this grant. And if it's in the best interest to do that, that's fine. But I think we all need to hold ourselves accountable that this is something that's important in the master plan to Robbins Island.
Anybody else? Councilman Alvarado.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I just want to kind of echo what Audrey said. I just feel like some of this could have brought forward sooner and just shared with us. I agree with her. I don't want to stop this. I think it's necessary. I think we have to move forward on it. I believe going forward, we keep the boardwalk in mind, but allocate those monies right now towards the structure. Just keep us in the loop. That's all we want. Thank you.
Anybody else have comments? Are we ready to move on to the next item? Okay, thank you.
Are we moving it forward?
It's up to the council.
I say let's keep it going, let the state know we're moving forward and that we're on board with this.
I'm seeing a 4-4.
With what?
Well, I'm not seeing you say that you want to move it forward. Would you like to move it forward or not?
It's really up to the other seven.
Okay.
I mean, this is where we've been. I mean, issues get brought to the council, and we get deadlocked when it comes to make a decision. And, and that's what I want us to do is, I mean.
What are we moving forward, though? I mean, a plan or just the legacy
No, to
grant?
move the money
Legacy
from the
grant.
boardwalk to put it towards a building.
Oh, sure, that just makes sense. This makes a lot of sense.
We have
Okay,
to.
We'll move it forward.
Thank you.
Thank you. Next, we have the Labor Relations Committee. Councilmember Maskey.
Of course, Labor met 2 weeks ago, and I think everybody was in attendance. One of the things that was asked for was an organizational chart. The HR director has put together the organizational chart as the city currently functions and can stand for any questions you have. if you have anything to add, feel free.
No, we just didn't have one when I started, so I just created it based off of the system that's currently running. So I guess it's available for any questions or concerns.
Councilmember Alvarado?
Oh, no, probably a simple answer, but with city council, that includes the mayor, or should it be a separate spot for the mayor, or not a separate spot, or do we just lump that all as one? I don't know.
Yeah, I could just change it so it says mayor and council.
I don't want to leave him out, you know. Thank you.
Councilmember Nelson?
Thank you. I know when this was on the agenda once before and was pulled, there was a question regarding the lines and the city clerk and the receptionist. And in a conversation again that I had with Administrator Holland, apparently we have some differences between job descriptions and contracts that I think that's an area that should be reviewed to make sure that we are following the direction that was given regarding the city clerk. And I don't know if that's something that he would like to look at and bring back to us, or what we want to do about that.
In the job description for the city clerk, when this was adopted in 2016, it has that the city clerk supervises the receptionist. So that is how the structure is set up right now. There would need to be council action to change that.
What's the difference in her contract?
She does not have an individual contract.
So I would defer to Mr. Holland as to what he was referencing the differences were.
The offer letter that was given to her.
Yes, there were, in her job description that was approved by the council, it is listed as a non-exempt position, but in the offer letter that was signed by Mike McGuire, it calls it an exempt position. So it wasn't about who she was supervising, it's whether the position was exempt or non-exempt.
Other questions regarding the organizational chart? Councilmember Fagerly?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Under planning and development, it says the airport. But then under the job description that's coming up for that position, because it's opening up, the airport manager is crossed out.
Yeah, we currently have the airport as running on the contract worker. It's not an employee running the airport. But we didn't want to exclude it from the organizational chart since it is still part of the city.
But who is the contract person working for then?
I forget his name.
Eric?
Thank you. Yes, Eric is the one running the airport right now under, I forget the name of that contract.
He works under the supervision of the planning department, and then also myself.
Okay. So that doesn't have to be in, or I can state that when it comes up for the position for Director of Planning.
Okay.
We were asked to bring, I don't know what the desire of the council is, or if we take this for information, or if you actually want to approve the organizational chart, but, so I'm at a loss of what we wish to do with this. I was asked to bring it here, and there it is.
If I may?
Please.
I think it says for discussion. I think we've done that. I think we can just accept it for right now as don't do anything.
Anyone else?
You have to add the mayor, though.
And we'll put the mayor on there, okay.
It's nice to have it, thank you.
Yes. All right, very good. The next item is Planning and Development Director job description. When we met, we talked about this before, and if there needed to be any changes to this, and as you see, there is strikeout language that does talk about some changes that have been made. I don't know if the HR director, you want to maybe summarize some of the changes that were made?
It was nothing major. Some conjunction with the EDC was added, some state reports on page 2. And at the third page, we added a preferred qualification, also knowledge of civil engineering practices. Nothing drastic, just an update since it had been a few years since it was updated.
Questions?
I would say move it forward to the council meeting.
Is there any objection to moving the thing forward this evening, or do we have some more questions?
Are we going to address what Councilmember
yep,
Fagerly said?
Absolutely.
Okay.
Councilmember Fagerly.
It appears to be like being a parent. The contract person at the airport, if he doesn't like what the director of development says, he'll go to the administrator or vice versa. So good person versus bad person. So I don't see that you can work under supervision of both people. So
Sure. You prefer to leave the airport manager in, is what you're requesting?
yes, or just put it under the administrator then.
Sure. Whatever's.
Whatever.
Well, do you have a preference of one over the other? I think.
Doesn't matter to me.
Okay.
Okay.
Council, any preference of where that authority should go?
I would just comment that, upon my arrival here, it was, the airport was under the supervision of the planning department. And of course, they could always appeal that to me. That hasn't changed. It would still remain that way. They don't come directly to me, but they had that privilege to appeal to me before, and they have it under their guidelines of their contract.
But it won't be because it's crossed out.
You put it back.
That needs to be added back into that position description that the airport.
Any other discussion about the director position? If there's not, we can move that forward to the regular council meeting with the addition of airport manager put back into that description. See no opposition to that. That's what we'll do. The next one, we had also asked for the Public Works Working Foreman pay scale update. We, as you know, approved a salary adjustment in that position that was taken to the union and denied. At the Labor Committee, we asked that that letter be resubmitted, and so this is the official update on that letter. Has that been sent?
Friday, yes.
Any questions regarding that issue? Councilmember Alvarado.
Well, thank you, Chairman. Now, when do you expect a result as a result of that letter being sent, or when will we know if it's been effective? Do we have any idea?
I will check in with them. I received a response that they received the MOU. Beyond that, I haven't received any other response, but I will check in with them to see whether it has been accepted or not. They are not required to vote on it. So I will check in and see what the status is periodically.
Okay, thank you.
City Administrator Holland.
I would just like to also add that last week, if you saw in my weekly notes, I met with the unions last week and talked briefly about the position, pay ranges and such, and the consideration for them. And they assured me that they would take this up immediately. So, you can interpret that hopefully maybe something this week, or at the latest at the no later than the first of the year, I would suppose. I also talked about that, the reasons that they had delayed it were no longer pertinent to the situation, that the situation needs to be remedied as soon as possible. And they agreed with me. At least that's what the leadership was. They still have to take it back to their membership. So I hope that they will agree with that. But we are definitely working on it.
Thank you.
Any other questions regarding that letter? All right, the next item on our agenda was the early retirement program. Also discussed at the Labor Committee 2 weeks ago was the future of the early retirement program. At that meeting, there were a couple options that were laid out. You see those alternatives that are laid out here on your sheet. Discontinuance of the program with a date of 6 months, or discontinuing eligibility for the program. I will tell you that there was a lot of references made there as far as the utilities was concerned. I did talk with the utilities of how that program worked there as well. They talked about they had the phasing off date kind of a thing set for eligibility. And they said in hindsight, one thing they wish they would have done with the thing we had talked about with the mass exodus potential was to actually put a caveat in there with years of experience of having them roll off eligibility. So if we were to consider an idea of discontinuing eligibility piece, perhaps that would be coupled with a way of rolling off of that eligibility use of the program. Said in hindsight, so they had sort of like a years of service. They were going to talk about like, because the idea of everybody leaving at once is probably not really great for the city and continuity. Is they said, well, if you had so many years of service, then we would expect a certain notification of retirement. If you had this, and it was just scaled down from like. And she put together a piece here so we can take a look at it, but 30 years, 25, 20, whatever it is, and have them roll off of the program instead of having the ability for all of them to roll off at the same time. But we stand for questions because we did say we wanted to consider both of these options. And so I guess we can continue that conversation that we had at the meeting 2 weeks ago. And if you would please add any information that I neglected to bring up.
I think you covered most of it, but we'll see what comes.
Well, maybe a more better explanation of that the page 31 with the years of service retirement thing. If you could maybe address that a little bit more.
This one, correct?
Yeah, that one.
This was just a sample schedule I came up with, so it's open to changes or suggestions, but something that we had discussed before about a phased out ending of the program rather than setting a hard date and losing 9, 10, 11 employees within 6 months. We could do a phase out and then spread that out a little farther. So then anyone, with 35 or more years of service, they'd have a retirement deadline of 12/31/2020, and then I just went in 5-year increments from there.
When would they have to give you that information as far as retirement?
The notice, in the third column there, it has the date they would have to put in their notice in order to receive the benefit by that end date.
I understand that part.
Yes.
But I'm not, the rest of it's not making sense to me for some reason.
Okay. So for an employee who had 35 or more years of service, we could.
As of, let's say, today.
As of today, yes. This
Okay.
was as of today's numbers, as of 2018. Then their retirement deadline would be 12/31/20, meaning we would have to have received their notice by September 30th of 2020 for the 90-day requirement.
Right. But then are they eligible for the early retirement?
Yes, if they retire by that date, by 12/31/2020.
And then, is everybody else getting this? Okay, so then if you move down to the 30 to 34,
Yes. Yep. So if you have 30, 31, 32, 33, or 34 years of service, you would have to retire by the end of the year in 2025, meaning you would have to receive your notice by September 30th of that year, and then you would still be eligible to get the benefit.
okay.
So
So
currently,
this would, they'd be locked in right now with their years of service. No one's years of service would increase. Like, this is the retirement date you would be locked into as of this day.
Okay.
because we talked about, the hard be done now piece versus you have 31 people that are eligible, increasing the eligible people at this point, but for the existing 31, having a way for them to still have the benefit, but rolling off at different times. That is the plan that you're looking at. Councilmember Nelson.
If I understand correctly, though, the 31 people have already worked at least 20 years.
Yes.
So why are the rest of these here if we were only working, if we were looking, this is like keeping it going forever, in my opinion.
This is, as of right now, we have not ended the eligibility for those with less than 20 years.
Right.
So if that is something you're choosing to do now, then you could get rid of the 15 years and below.
But that would mean we would still go out to 2035.
If you follow the schedule exactly, yes.
But you can adjust that schedule.
Yes.
But I just wanted you to see the potential of, if you want to talk about buyer's remorse of what the utilities said, they wish they would have had a scale off. Granted, this is the continuation, if you look at those bottom 4 categories, would be if we were continuing the system in case there was an appetite for peeling this off. I had asked, put all options out there. If you're going to end the program now, it's very easy to, I think there was a reference a few times of ripping Band-Aids off. However, this might have been a in the middle proposition to have the eligibility wean off over time for those that are currently eligible in the system. And so if you're uncomfortable with the other 19 down to 1, if you were to put a line under the 20 to 24, that would be in line with option 2 on the council alternatives. Councilmember Schwantes.
Thank you. I am probably the one who spoke most vocally about this at our labor relations meeting, and I still support option number 1. You know, Friday I was at a chamber connection that was hosted at a particular business, and at the end of each of those meetings, they always ask the host, and in this case there were 3 businesses that were hosting, and they asked them, what is the one thing that we can do for you as a community? And I would always expect a business to say, give us referrals, right, for customers. But instead, their answer was, bring us employees, because we cannot get enough qualified employees to work for us, and we've got vacancies. So in this world of short demand of employees, and again, this is not going to go away. As baby boomers continue to retire, our labor market is just going to get tighter and tighter and tighter. And I just think if we were to make this business decision today, if we were to would we put something like this into place today if it was coming to us fresh and new? And I don't think that we would. I don't think we would consider it. Why would we incent people to retire early when we need them and we want to keep them? And so I think that the most prudent thing to do is to discontinue the program. And you could argue, but we've got some really superstars that we do not want to lose. But no matter when we drop this date, we will have superstars that will be at risk, right? And how do you say, for those that have 20 years in, you're qualified, but that person that had 19 years and 10 months, sorry, that's where we cut the line off. It's never going to be fair. It's never going to be fun. It's never going to be a popular decision to make. But I step back and say, if we are to make a basis on being a business decision, we discontinue the program. But we give people enough time to be able to make a thoughtful decision, consider the options, and still give that notice within a reasonable period of time. So I still would be in favor of number 1, discontinuing the program effective July 1st.
Councilmember Rasmussen.
The same argument that I don't want to lose long-term employees, I think of the brain drain and losing that knowledge and losing that experience and the dedication to our 20-plus year employees. I want to keep them, and I don't want to have to force them to go out 2 or 3 years earlier than they would have, which we would do if we set a July 1st deadline. So I'm not in favor of just 6 months out and discontinuing it.
But no matter when, I'm sorry.
Yep.
No matter when you do that, you have that same risk. So whether you do it today or in a year, but in the meantime, you continue to have the risk of losing those individuals.
Well, I'd say though, and with B, you mitigate it by basically not allowing them all to leave at the same time.
Right.
Therefore, you retain it, because what you do is that comes with a caveat that it is going to sunset. There will be no new eligibility set by whatever the date is what it sounds like is the wishes of the council, which means, and then instead of losing those long-term employees we currently have, you're setting a slow roll-off. I think maybe that's what's on here might be too slow of a roll-off, but that can be modified. I like the idea of honoring the brain trust we currently have and rolling them off. That policy has been in place. Many of them probably had been expecting that. Obviously, I am quite aware legally that that might not be something that we have to necessarily honor if they're not eligible and on the program as we speak, but still, it would have been probably an expectation of that employer or the employment. So I see that as sort of a compromise between, it's not keeping it forever, it's setting the deadline, but it's not also creating something that could have bigger ramifications than we know. It could be fairly ugly. So I thought it seemed like a nice compromise position, and that's what the utilities, when they looked at it, thought as well. But they didn't have the same eligibility that we have currently. Councilmember Alvarado.
Yeah, I think the line has been drawn for eligibility on December 31st, 2017, discontinuing that benefit. So the employees are aware of that if they were hired after that, they're not going to be entitled to that benefit. I kind of like your roll-off compromise. I think, Julie, I was approached saying it was kind of an incentive for this person to have this, to be here, to keep on staying because of this opportunity later on, rather than maybe having to make a tough choice and move on. So I'm leaning towards the compromise. And if it's a little different than what you proposed, let's hear it.
Well, I think council can go with them, some of those ideas, but I think some of those dates might be a little long. But Councilmember Nelson.
I'm torn between just ending it and doing a step off as you're talking about. But I was just looking at the categories. The first category, talking about 2020. What if we did it in 5 years? What would it look like in 5 years if you have the 20 to 35 and just this is like saying we're going to continue forever. So if you dropped off the bottom 4 tiers and did the other in 5 years, so the last year would be 2025. What would that look like? And I guess the other question I have is this something that I don't want to drag this on by any means. Is it something we should make a decision on tonight? Do we have enough information? I mean, we all got an email today. Did everybody have a chance to read it? I don't know. Is it something we should keep trying to figure out tonight, or do we want to take additional time? I'm not sure that additional time will help us to make the decision, but I'm just curious with what people are thinking about the time frame of making a decision.
When financially, you could maybe go over the finances. There is a current pot of money, and if you stop eligibility, that pot will not get larger. It will only get smaller, and as things roll off, depends on who takes it and who does not, it will just continue to get smaller. That's my understanding, but if you stop and you don't put those last 4 on there, then it freezes. Obviously, if you keep perpetuating it, it will continue to grow. Councilmember Christensen.
Thank you. I don't think that we would lose a slug of employees by Councilmember Schwante's idea of ending it in July. If I'm a city employee and I like my job, I'm getting paid well and I got health insurance, it's number 1 in the state. And a retirement that's going to continue to grow. I don't think we're going to lose those employees. I could see losing the ones that have been there maybe really over 30 years and are eager to do something else, but I suspect they all like their job. I mean, look what they're doing for the city. These guys are up every morning out cleaning the snow, cleaning the sewer, making sure everything functions. And I agree with Kathy on the idea that no business would do this today. Nobody in the private sector is going to discuss this and then put it forward as a policy. I don't think that would happen. It may look like a roll of the dice or a crapshoot, but it has to end sometime. This has got to end.
Well, I think both of them ended at the same time, eligibility-wise. But, play devil's advocate, your position of, well, they don't think they're going to leave, then they won't use the program either, if it's still there.
Just my thoughts.
Yep. Other council members? Bringing it to the council right now, it seems that we are quite divided on this. We can't obviously vote here, but to bring it, it would just seem like we're going to hash out the same things. Do we want to have a time to think about it? Is there any additional information that would help? Changing the slide-off scale, would that be something you want to see? There were some inputs that we had gotten a few emails from certain groups. Any of that information you want to think about or wait for?
It's just a delay. I mean, why not bring it up and have a motion made at the council meeting, one way or another, or two motions? Or we keep delaying our decision making. It's like we don't know what we're doing, and we just go, well, let's wait another 2 weeks.
Councilor Paulman.
Thank you, Mr. Meskey. The one possibility is before we make the decision, if we still want two options to choose from, we could take the suggestions that were recommended and discussed by dropping the bottom and then maybe accelerating the schedule. And that would maybe, because right now we're here and we're here, and we got option A, option B. If we did that, that may get option B a little closer to here, and there may be some negotiation points that would give us kind of two definitive possible roads.
And I would think that no matter which of those two, eligibility would be done. We could probably move the eligibility piece forward, and if you want to wait on how to either end the program at a date or roll off, that could be something we could talk about tonight. That would make sense, but.
I just think, if I may, I just think based on the nature of what I'm hearing where people are at, I think it would maybe offer a compromise to the compromise, if there's a good way of putting it that way.
Yep.
Or maybe a compromise to the compromise and kind of meet in the middle of where we are right now, and maybe that would satisfy, be enough to get a couple of votes from both sides and make a new compromise.
Are you suggesting that happens this evening? I think
Oh, boy.
I think it might be difficult to do that.
Okay.
in a
So
break.
we're talking like, do it for 10 years,
Yeah, I would.
making the sunset date in 10 years.
I was thinking maybe seeing an accelerated schedule that might be more palatable to those who may be inclined to vote for just a hard cutoff right now. So there would still be two options on the table, but that may be something that could be a compromise piece from where we are with
Way too long,
this
way too
document. That's all I was thinking.
Let's get it done.
And if we had that accelerated schedule in front of us on paper, it would be easier to digest before voting.
Councilmember Fagerly?
Thank you. It appears to me that no matter what date you're going to discontinue it, someone's going to get hurt eventually. So just bring it forward and see what happens.
But I'm just saying, for me anyway, option B, the dates on here are gone. That's what Councilmember Plowman is saying as well. But,
It's just going to continue it, though.
pardon?
It's just going to continue it. You got to have a sunset immediately.
Well, that
So-
part, I don't think there's a disagreement. It's just how you want to deal with those 31 employees who have been working for the city. Councilmember Nelson?
I just feel 10 years is too long. I couldn't support that. So I think we have to find a way to end it, and I'm not sure we've come up with a compromise. I'm just ending.
This is why we don't bring half ideas to the council. City Attorney, Scott.
Thank you, Councilmember Meskey, members of the council. Just a procedural note to, I think, inform your decision on how to proceed. We strongly recommend that you take any action to amend this program by resolution. We did supply a resolution, I think, that reflects option 1, just because that was clear and easy to draft. Option 2 is still emerging as a possibility. Certainly, we could take the council's discussion and direction or consensus to the extent we can identify it from this discussion and work on a resolution for you to consider at the next meeting or a future meeting in January. Otherwise, I think we would have to try and hammer out the specifics on the fly in a regular meeting, which could, I mean, I'm not saying it's impossible, but.
Oh, I don't like that part, but I would agree with you. I think we probably need to have both resolutions clearly articulated and then choose one of them. Are we comfortable with waiting and putting this, actually not another working session, putting this on the next council agenda?
You mean like at 7 o'clock?
No, I mean at the first one in January,
At the work session or the council meeting?
council meeting. I don't think we
With
need to have
two
this kind,
options.
with two options, one with the roll-off, but with an adjusted time frame that is only to 20-year, just to eligibility. I think that's going to be less employees. It's the 31 that we have to deal with. Is that correct?
Sure. Yes, it's 31 as of today that are currently eligible for the program.
Am I hearing any objection to that? Or do we? Councilmember Nelson?
Just, this question's just in my head. If we bring it forward, the resolution is prepared for option A. If we bring it forward and option A does not pass, we could bring back a different version of option B at the next meeting with a different resolution, could we not?
Sure.
Shouldn't option B be drafted and prepared, ready to go so that we can make the decision right then?
Yes.
Sit on the fly.
I would agree.
Is anyone here not made a decision how they're going to go? I'd just say get it done. I mean, but, well, delay.
But if you wish to, I think the compromise of the two positions would be they both have the same sunset of eligibility. You could certainly bring forward the eligibility stops as of December 31st. And is that, excuse me, City Attorney Scott, what is the date in your resolution of, is it today?
The date I drafted, which was consistent again with option 1, I believe, was that the program would be discontinued effective July 1st of 2019, meaning that the notices would be due 90 days before that or March 31st.
So if you're wishing to do something today, if you wanted to try to get everybody feeling comfortable about making a decision, you can put that in both of the resolutions at the same date, and then January 1, they both are done. And then it's just a matter if you wish to roll them off or if you want to have them firm date set. Is that not?
No, that doesn't make sense.
I wasn't not sure I was following you.
Eligibility for the program would stop January 1.
Of what year then? 2025?
No. Of eligibility, we have 31 employees who are currently eligible for the program. Now, to those that have actually timed out, that's different, but those that are eligible for the program, it's my understanding is 31. Is that correct?
Yes.
And if you were to discontinue the program, you're saying you're going to stop it on January 1.
As drafted after listening to the council's discussion at the Labor Committee meeting. But that's obviously, if the council wants to adjust that, it's easy to do.
I'm saying that if you wanted to stop the program and bringing more people on who would be eligible, you end the eligibility date as January 1. That way it's incongruent with both Plan A and B. So no matter which one you pick, we're not bringing more eligible people on after July or January 1.
I don't remember.
Because of that 6-month window, you're saying a few more people would become eligible possibly?
I'm not sure if the resolution you drafted ended eligibility. I think it just said you need to retire by this date. So it didn't address
I see.
eligibility.
Because that was the piece that
Because it would have been ending
the
July
utilities
1st.
clearly had an eligibility end date, and we did not. And
Ours was only December 1st, 2018 if you're hired.
sorry, because
Yeah.
that's what they said. that we should have probably did when we put the sunset on of the eligibility on the end, we needed to shut off eligibility on the front end, because that's how they did it.
Yes.
And they said if you end that eligibility, that's where you should have people roll off. So when I talk about eligibility, I'm talking about being eligible for the actual program itself. I've been talking a lot about it, sorry. I have to assume that we were on the same page, so. Because I think eligibility, because we're kicking the can down the road. I say we're not kicking the can down the road. If you end eligibility, then it just stops. It's then a matter of, are you going to let the 31 employees be eligible for the program and wean off of it, or are you going to take those 31 employees and eliminate them? It makes the decision much easier for you to deal with at the next council meeting.
Councilmember Muskie, if I
Yes.
may, just to make sure I'm on the same wavelength. I think you're suggesting kind of an interim measure. So
Correct.
passing a resolution at the regular meeting tonight, we can easily strike the paragraph where I said the program itself discontinues and replace it with a new paragraph saying eligibility is cut off for any employees who are not eligible by a certain date.
Correct.
So we can do that tonight.
That, I think we would have consensus on that, and then address the bigger question of how you wish to deal with the existing people that are eligible, because it's going to be a finite number. It'll be 31 approximately. And we can deal with that at a later date, at the January meeting. Council, what do you think? All right. Councilmember Christensen?
It's the same answer every time. We will come to a decision. We need to make a decision, and I think everybody here agrees here it needs to be sunsetted or ended. We agree that, okay? There's a problem here, we all agree on it. There's two logical answers, I think, 1 and 2. I think 3 is not an acceptable one. Am I in agreement there? Well, there's 2. Let's bring it forward and see who's for 1 and see who's for 2. Pretty simple.
If I may, the only fly in the ointment there is that if anybody around the table is in favor of sunsetting, it's the details of that sunsetting that need to be ironed out. It's the variables, how it sunsets. And right now, I mean, if there was a vote made on 1 or 2, as they stand, people may vote one way. Whereas if it was more clearly defined, or if it was slightly tweaked or changed another way, the sunset option, you may get votes a different direction, which may.
But 2 is defined. They're both defined. I don't think there's.
But some of us don't like some of us don't like the way it's defined.
And 2 was not defined, and 2 was not, a resolution was not put together of option B. In defense, if you want to truly deal with the 2 issues. But I think we have consensus to move forward with the issue that Robert Scott did that ends eligibility for the program, and then it's just a matter of dealing with the 31 employees. It does put an end to it. As painful as that may be for employees that might be close, the end date is definitive, and that I do believe we have consensus on. So we'll move that piece today to the council and move dueling resolutions for January, for lack of a better term. All right, that's what we'll do. Seeing that other discussion. So that is it for labor.
Thank you. We're 10 minutes before the council meeting is to start. We have 4 items left on the agenda for this meeting. What would the council like to take up? Would you like to move them all to the next meeting? Would you like to work until 7 o'clock and then go into the next meeting?
Let's take a break.
I agree we should take a break. Any other discussion?
I think we should bring them all to the council meeting tonight and discuss them at the council meeting. Add them all onto the agenda as they are here.
Is there consensus with that?
Including the monthly report.
Well, there's 2 out of the 4 are listed that they require action tonight, so we might as well listen to our finance report also and have a report on the 292 and deal with the issues that we were expected to deal with anyway.
Sounds good to me.
Okay, we're adjourned from the work session.